The name Frank is used just as much as a first name as it is a surname, yet whether it be a first name or surname, its origins are the same. The name Frank has its roots in the Germanic people of the Franks, with the name thought to mean free or free man. Now, the surname Frank is still pretty popular and common throughout the world today, and while there are many people throughout history with the surname Frank, my opinion is that the most famous Frank of them all, in an ideal world, wouldn't be famous at all, at least not for the same reasons why she is famous today. But the world that we do live in led to this poor girl becoming an icon due to her circumstances, her identity, and her writing ability. I'm of course talking about Anne Frank. It must be remembered that Anne Frank's story is just one of many. It's her story, however, we are most familiar with, as while she didn't survive the Holocaust, her diary did. It went on to be published in many languages around the world as one of the most detailed accounts of the extreme measures that ordinary people were thrown into under the Nazi regime. Her parents had lived a pretty normal life. Otto Frank was born in Frankfurt in 1889 as the son of a banker. Her mother, Edith Hollander, was born in 1900 to a scrap-dealing father. The two were wed on the 12th of May 1925, and it was just over a year later they had their first child, a daughter named Margot Frank, on the 16th of February 1926. 3 years later, on the 12th of June, their second and youngest daughter, Anneliese Marie Frank, was born in Frankfurt, Germany. Of course, she was more commonly just called Anne. Before the Nazi rule of Germany, Anne Frank was just like any other young girl. She enjoyed reading, spending time with her family and friends. Her family enjoyed ice skating and skiing holidays in the winter months. This life of normality, however, came to an end when Hitler rose to power in Germany. Otto relocated himself, his wife and daughters from Germany to Holland when he saw how the Nazis were treating the Jewish people, which of course he and his family were. They lived in Amsterdam somewhat peacefully until early July 1942, when her family and business associates of her father went into hiding in an annex of her father's office. It was here they hid from the Nazis, and Anne wrote her diary for 2 years. It was on the 4th of July in 1944 they were discovered by the Gestapo. From here they were sent to various camps. Otto and Edith were sent to Auschwitz, and their daughters Margot and Anne were sent to Bergen-Belsen. Edith died in Auschwitz of starvation in 1945. Both Margot and Anne too died in 1945, thought to be of typhus, just weeks before British forces liberated the camp. Only their father, Otto Frank, survived the Holocaust. He went back to their hiding place in Amsterdam to retrieve Anne's writings and got them published so a story could be read by millions around the world. Otto went on to remarry a lady called Ethelred Markovitz in 1953. He died of lung cancer in 1980 after leading the rest of his life making sure the words of his daughter would reach as many people as possible. Anne Frank was just 15 years old when she died. Of course she didn't have any children to pass her name on to. Neither did her sister Margot. Historically, the lineage of names is passed down the male side of the family, so to see if any more family members with the surname Frank are still alive today, we don't need to delve into Anne's mother's family tree. So what about her father? As I mentioned, after the Holocaust, Otto did remarry. While he didn't have any children with this second wife, she had a daughter from a previous relationship, Eva Schloss, though very little seems to be known of her when she died or if she had any children of her own. She would, however, have been Anne's stepsister. Otto Frank was the second eldest in a family of 4 siblings. He had an older brother named Robert and a younger brother named Herbert, and his youngest sibling, his sister Helen. From my findings, neither Robert or Herbert had any children. In fact, it was just Otto himself and his sister Helen who had any. Helen had 2 sons, Stephen and Bernard, but of course, as Helen Frank was a woman and she got married to a Mr. Eric Elias, she became Helen Elias, with her children Stephen and Bernard too being Eliases. While they may not have the surname Frank, they are of course related to our young diarist. So what became of them? Well, very little seems to be known about Stephen Elias, but Bernard Elias we have a lot more information on. If you suck just as much as me at keeping track of family trees, then I should tell you that Bernard was Anne's first cousin. The two were close. Bernard, more popularly known as Buddy, was an expert skater on the ice rink. Remember how I said Anne and her family would go skating in the winter months? It was with Buddy and his family Anne would go skating with. They often wrote to each other, with Anne asking if one day they could be skating partners, knowing she'd have to train very hard to be as good as him. He received his last letter from Anne on his 17th birthday in June 1942, before Anne and her family went into hiding. Buddy died on the 16th of March 2015, but did have 2 children of his own, Oliver Elias and Patrick Elias, but I can't seem to find much information on these guys either, minus that they're still alive to this day, it would seem. It makes sense that there isn't too much information on these 2 out there in the world, however. Unlike other famous names I've looked into like this, Anne Frank didn't dictate her own path. She was an ordinary girl who had no control over what happened to her. The diary was used as a way to deal with and escape the despair of her life hiding in the annex. We don't know what she would have achieved in her life if the Holocaust never happened. Luckily, her relatives alive today are far enough removed from her and are able to live a normal, long life. The kind of life Anne unfortunately never got the chance to live. Thank you to everyone who supports Name Explain on Patreon. $1 may not seem like much, and it really isn't, but by donating just $1 a month on Patreon, you are doing a seriously amazing thing to support Name Explain, especially as I've recently made this my full-time job. Any financial support from you guys is incredible. $2 a month gets your name here with all these amazing people. Thank you.